Director of Product Marketing at Knowledge Lake. Welcome to the third in our three-part series of our transformative webinar series featuring Dr. Leslie Willcocks and Dr. John Hindle, the esteemed authors of Maximizing Value with Automation and Digital Transformation, a Realist Guide. In today's webinar, our presenters will offer expert insights into strategic decision-making for implementing AI and automation. And they'll also delve into case studies demonstrating triple win outcomes for businesses, customers, and your employees. But before we begin, a few housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and available for viewing later on demand. We encourage your participation, so please ask questions in the chat window and we'll address them during the Q&A session. And now, to start us off, here's Knowledge Lake's Bart Peluso, our VP of Marketing. Bart?
Thank you so much, Pam, and thanks everyone for joining. I am very excited to talk about automation today. I've been in process automation since 2010, and there's never been a more dynamic and disruptive time as we look at intuitive AI-powered automation. There was a recent study by McKinsey with a 1,000-person sample population, and 90% of the C-level executives believed that AI will have a significant impact on their business. So everyone's looking at AI. Furthermore, a Gartner study revealed that 70% of US-based CIOs are receiving budget increases specifically for AI trials and AI-related projects. Overall, global spending on AI-based software, especially AI automation type software, is increasing, more than doubling in just under 4 years. AI is not magic, as Bill Gates said. It just enables a lot faster performance of documented tasks. And it does it a lot more faster than humans. So the world is embracing AI-powered automation, but there's some hesitancy there. Where do you start? How do you start? So the question is your organization ready for AI-powered automation? You may be more ready than you think because it's available and being deployed very successfully by progressive organizations, both large and small, right now. With that, it is my absolute pleasure to turn this over to Dr. Leslie Willcocks. Leslie?
Thank you very much, Bart, and good afternoon from London, England. I first want to just give a very brief summary of what this automation technology does, because it's not one thing. So, for example, robotic process automation has been in the market since 2003 and got great take-up from about 2014 on. And what it does is pretty simple. It takes the robot out of the human, as we like to say, which means that it automates tasks normally done by humans that are short cycle, relatively simple, and essentially, in inverted commas, mindless. They don't need a lot of brain power to carry out. They tend to be very repetitive, simple tasks in an administration setting. Having said that, and this is a pretty dumb software, it is the engine room of multiple processes across sectors. So it's an essential, but not sufficient, piece of technology to get administration done. Which brings us into why we're focusing on intelligent automation and artificial intelligence, which does many things, like RPA, but to even greater extent, it provides speed, accuracy, and scale, massive scale in some respects. But it's more sophisticated because it tries to put what we call the human into the robot. It takes other human capabilities that involve cognition, even emotion, and tries to automate those and put them into processes. And where that is successful, it is extremely powerful indeed. So these are very potentially very powerful, usable technologies, but at the far end of them, in the cutting edge area, we are still experiencing a lot of uncertainty. And we think that the sorts of generative AI uses, which are being heavily researched and financed this year, will really come on stream and be much more adopted next year. Excuse me. But having said that, outfits like Knowledge Lake actually have used AI in a very limited way, but a very powerful way. And you can actually get business value from those applications today if you wish to do so. So that's a very quick review of where the technologies are. I want to say this, that too often these technologies are sold as silver bullets, and AI is very guilty of that. The technology vendors often oversell this. We find all the time that it's more about management than the technology. We've found this since we first started researching this in about 1986. Excuse me. And the result is that since it's more about management, there are a great deal of risks that you have to circumvent, mitigate in order to get the technology working in a particular organization, let alone gaining business value. In fact, we wrote a whole book on this in 2018, I think, which identified 41 risks across the life cycle of any automation project. And these are still true. And I give you some examples there when you look at these different potential time bombs. Thinking small and short term on strategy, wrong sourcing model, depending too much on the technology vendors, selecting the wrong tool, not getting stakeholder buy-in, not being able to launch the project properly, not having done a lot of the earlier things incorrectly, reaping the disbenefits of that later on in operations and execution. We find that there's an awful lot of, we go back to that one, there's an awful lot of money spent in less successful automations on the maintenance budget, which is a euphemism for what we didn't do right first time, that we're going to have to do right the second time very often. So very often these are quite big costs that are experienced, and very often those are the inhibitors to future automation projects. You know, God, this is costing us much more than we thought. Maybe we should delay going into this the next time. And then across change management, maturity, again, risks emerge that need constant management. You have to manage the whole life cycle of these projects. You can't see it as a plug and play set of technologies. With that in mind, let me move to the next slide, where my colleague John Hindle will talk through, nevertheless, some of the case studies that we have where triple win benefits were achieved. So over to John.
Thank you, Leslie. I was intrigued with your recounting of technological history, and it made me think, if you just think in the last 30 years, when we first moved from analog to digital in communications, We had cellular and text, and then the internet, and then cloud, and then RPA, and cognitive, and AI, and now we're into generative. All these technologies build on themselves. Each one becomes a building block, and value grows by adding technologies and creating services that eliminate drudgery and improve productivity and compliance and create new service opportunities. And the interesting thing about this is that the companies and the individuals and entities that are adopting these technologies and using them as building blocks are finding what we call a triple win. They deliver multiple kinds of value. We increase value for shareholders, for customers, and for employees if we do this right. And thinking about from a shareholder perspective, we can see real advantage, monetizable advantage in speed and scale that we achieve through the implementation of these technologies. I think of a Middle Eastern bank, for example, that Leslie and I interviewed, that reduced the check processing time in a multilingual environment from 9 minutes to 20 seconds. 9 minutes to 20 seconds, including signature authorization and anti-money laundering compliance. That would have been a dream even 5 to 10 years ago, and now it's available. We see value for customers in reducing complexity. The shareholders and the customers who benefit from the activity of a online retailer in the UK who is able, using this technology, to achieve the triple win that we talk about of shareholder, customer, and value by identifying false or fraudulent transactions while goods are actually out on the highway being delivered and able to call them back and before they get delivered. This is, again, the customer benefits, the shareholder benefits, and the employee benefits by not having to deliver stuff that just shouldn't be delivered. My point is that these technologies reinforce each other, and there are multiple examples, as Leslie has suggested, of where they create this kind of reinforcing value across the chain, creating what we call the triple win. Next slide. So what we want to do now is outline some management insights that we've gathered from our research that can be applied to help any organization as it begins this journey. But I must say we haven't met in our research as technology is being applied too many horror stories. I mean, we see the horror stories that get thrown up in the media, but most of the work that we see by organizations that apply this methodologically and intentionally are seeing significant results. So it's about really selecting the right sourcing options. And Leslie, do you want to talk about that?
Well, what I want to talk about, John, is that we're constantly finding one truth, which is that the technology takes a lot of profile, but actually it's management that solves the problems, not the technology. 75% of the challenges are managerial, not technological, and people start the other way around, like they are with artificial intelligence at the moment. You know, oh, here's the technology, how can we utilize it? Well, why not ask another question, which is, are we ready managerially to utilize it? That's the question that you have to ask first. And there are a number of managerial questions that have to be addressed before you address the technological challenge. The first one is, what is your sourcing option? And we did a lot of research into this. We looked at over 1,000 implementations of automations of various kinds across the globe. And it became clear that the best option was the one on the top left, which is you have to own the solution. You have to understand this technology and how it's going to fit and drive business benefits for you. You have to not allow yourself tool lock-in. You have to allow yourself flexibility about what tools you're going to use now and in the future. You want to, by owning the technology and owning the management of it, you will capture all the gains that are available rather than the transaction costs that you have to spend on otherwise. And in a world that's moving towards deglobalization, increasingly, it may well be that you're experiencing offshoring fatigue, in which case automation provides a reshoring opportunity. Now, the people who go down that route invariably are doing it themselves, but they are also utilizing consultants, advisors, and even technology vendors to help them get started, to get them set up. But it's on a learning basis. It's not on a you do it, we receive it basis. It's on a we are learning together with the consultants and advisors, and eventually it will be handed over to us to manage. The other options are being taken, but they don't come out as well in terms of business value as the one in the top left-hand corner. Let me move on. I could talk all day about the right sourcing option, but I'm going to talk instead about choosing the right tool for the task, because people who don't really get to grips with the technology don't understand that this is not one thing. AI is not one thing. It's one phrase that covers multiple technologies, sets of technologies and capabilities. And I'll very briefly describe what is available, starting from the left-hand side of this, which is relatively simple, where you're just automating what someone does on a desktop. You just press a button and it's automated that particular administrative task, which may not be connected up to other technologies, other systems, and could probably not be utilized on an enterprise basis, through to robotic process automation technologies that are actually enterprise safe and enterprise scalable, through to shell software development tools where they provide the framework in which you then have to code in order to create the automation software, through to increasingly available cloud-based robotic process automation that you can bring down as a service from the internet, from the cloud. So all these are available, but they all have pros and cons, and much of it depends upon what your purposes are. But then when you move to the right-hand side of this diagram, you're trying to do more complex tasks, usually involving unstructured data, in which case you need technologies that enable you to use unstructured data. And then you're starting to use algorithms, machine learning, and producing decision-making outcomes that are probabilistic. It's essentially saying this is a better option than this option. And you're utilizing this full range of capabilities that are not available with robotic process automation. So Knowledge Lake has the RPA capability, but it also has much of the capability you can see there listed on the right-hand side. There are a variety of tools which you can choose to use or not use, depending upon what you're trying to achieve. So I'm trying to say, this is not a simple choice. This is a managerial choice, and much depends upon what your business imperative is, what your purpose is, but also on your managerial readiness. Are you ready to manage the tools on the right-hand side as opposed to the ones that are closer to the left-hand side? everyone that we know who's experienced in digital transformation, everyone that we've interviewed, hundreds of people, will tell you that governments, automation governance and digital transformation governance has to start on day one. You have to have this in place before you start developing and implementing the technology. And it can be quite a complex process because you have a variety of stakeholders to involve. You have on the left-hand side the business managers, the business units, who will be developing what we call the business application strategy. This is what the business applications have to be able to do. Then on the right-hand side, you have the technical people. They will be developing the digital automation technology strategy. They will know what is the most efficient technologies to achieve those business purposes. And somewhere in the middle for automation and digital, you will have to developing a center of excellence that draws upon both these sources of wisdom, the business wisdom and the technology wisdom, in order to create an engine room that will assess business projects that are feasible or not feasible, and then produce a business value project as a result of processing through the center of excellence. And above that, you have to have a committee, a group of people at executive level who can actually manage all that and give a coherent, centralized view on what is going to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. So this is no mean feat to create these governments of, well, I call it digital and automation governance, creating that early. Finally, in order to deliver that, you actually have to have people capabilities. And you're going to have to invest in new kinds of work, new kinds of jobs. So if you look at the operational jobs, I think these are quite well understood. You need a business process architect, intelligent automation developers, intelligent automation quality assurance, continuous improvement people, IA controllers. You have the IT function has roles to play in informing and supporting the automation. But then you have to have these business people at the top of this diagram. You have to have business sponsors in business units who are going to help drive the projects. You're going to need business subject matter experts who can tell you what the processes are really doing and what the challenges are going to be. You're going to need a person sitting on the board who's an executive champion, who's going to support this, resource it, make sure that it's on target, set the vision. And then you're going to have a much more hands-on executive who's really very credible to all these players, who's going to set the vision, motivate and drive to make sure the whole thing is going forward against the strategic plan. So those are just some of the things, but I want to pass on to John now, who's going to talk about one of I think the weakest capability that we found when we looked at 7 core capabilities you need to do automation and digital transformation, which is change management.
Thanks, Leslie, and you're exactly right. And I think managing change effectively is one of the biggest challenges that organizations have when they're adopting new technologies. And the key to this is what I call intentionality. It is being deliberate and focused and intentional about the advantages and the consequences of adopting a new technology, because basically you're upskilling and changing the nature of work that the organization undertakes. And we have multiple examples from our research of situations where companies where employees have been given opportunities for new learning and doing more meaningful work, as Leslie referenced, rather than rote administration, being trained with new skills, and even being given greater authority and autonomy in making decisions as processes move forward. So it gives also the opportunities for employees to manage what we call robotic digital assistants, even to the point where, Leslie, in some of our research, we've seen employees naming their digital assistants, giving them names and personalities, and viewing them as auto colleagues rather than as competitive execution capabilities. And employees also get customer recognition for the better services that they're able to deliver with the assistance of robotic support, and experiencing fewer customer complaints. Horror stories really didn't feature very heavily in our research. More often, companies that were adopting these technologies redeployed workers and gave them more complex tasks and freed them of the kind of mechanical rote processes that are better suited to an automated platform. Also, we found that work can be taken back from outsourcers, which changes the mix of onshore and offshore and in-house and support. So there are various ways of mitigating and enhancing the addition of digital workers to an organization. And of course, in the end, there are other, part-time options or even early retirement. Redundancy tended to be the very last resort in the companies that we saw, and it did not play a major role. It was really business expansion and upgrading the skills and the opportunities for employees who were currently on board and knew the organization and knew the customers well. So it's the approach that is taken to harvesting the gains from the addition and the implementation of this technology in ways that enrich not just the customer experience, but the employee experience as well. And it goes back to the slide we saw earlier about the triple win. You are delivering value for shareholders, you are delivering a better experience for customers, and you are also enhancing employee skills and happiness and satisfaction. So this is, there are ways that we've seen companies do this very effectively. Next slide. Okay, so the key to this, in many ways, is to bring IT on board early in the process, and not to view IT as a simple delivery function. Because IT has a full-time job managing the delivery of the service as is, but they are also critical to delivering the service as it will be. If digital technology is the agent of change, IT in this environment is also the agent of continuity, okay? They have different missions, different goals, and different mindsets. You set up an organization to understand, architect, and deploy the capabilities of artificial intelligence and robotic process automation. It's sort of like changing the engines while the airplane is flying. It's not a straightforward task. Digital tech transformation needs support for the transition, and IT, of course, is the entity that knows how the hearse runs and where the bodies are buried. So you can't do this without them, and it's a mistake not to involve them early and often. So it's about establishing, in the research we've seen, a relationship that's a win-win partnership with an agreed governance engine, outlining the shared responsibilities of the transformation initiative and ongoing IT that aligns with their respective tool sets and skill sets. So it's positioned as a win-win. IT will benefit from additional investment in infrastructure and from less firefighting, and the organization as a whole will benefit from the introduction of new capabilities and technologies based on automation and artificial intelligence. Next slide. So Leslie, I think I started this discussion, but I think it bears further comment about the integration of the cognitive bits and the automation bits.
I think, John, this was about how surprised we were to discover when we studied some very large organizations, major telecoms companies, financial services companies, insurance companies, that were doing very well on automation and we're doing quite well on digital transformation. But the two camps never met. They never met. It was really quite bizarre. And we identified, and there's a whole chapter in our book on it, a blind spot in organizations where automation did its thing, digital transformation had a completely different structure and people to report to, and they did their thing. They got different budgets, and the two never integrated what they were up to. It was really quite odd. And so very early on, our management insight here is you've not only just got to integrate what you're doing with robotic process automation with cognitive automation in order to achieve what we call intelligent automation, bringing together RPA and those more sophisticated technologies and using them together. You've not only got to do that, you've also got to integrate what you're doing with intelligent automation with what you're doing with digital transformation. So you're not the only technology in town, automation. There are, as you can see in this diagram, at least 9, and I think it's now, we've expanded that to 11 now, technologies in play that are potentially of massive business value if you use them separately, but if you start using them together and in an integrated way, is enormous business value. And the consultancies who write about this talk about massive $1 trillion value from digital transformation, but that's where it comes from, utilizing these technologies in an integrated way with intelligent automation and AI, not used separately, but together with these other technologies where it is purposeful and where it makes business sense. So you have to integrate what you're doing with automation, with digital transformation very early in the strategic direction. We did what we think, we're very proud of this work, and we might be a bit ahead of our time on it because we did in-depth research with real companies and for a couple of years, and we formulated from the empirical evidence from their actual experiences, all anonymized, but nevertheless real companies, that there were 7 core capabilities that you had to build in order to achieve real digital transformation. Now, when you look at those, and I'm not going to go in great detail, but if you drop us a line, we can easily give you more data on this. But also, if you read our book, it will give much more detail about how to build these capabilities. But what we found was that these take an enormous amount of time to build. It might take up to 2 years for a large organization to really get to sort of 4 out of 5. If your maximum potential was 5, 4 out of 5 on most of these. And some of the companies were 4 out of 5 on about 5 of these capabilities, and we're working hard on the other 2 capabilities. The weakest ones were the last 2, change management and measurement. In fact, measurement most organizations are not that good at progressive measurement. They use very old traditional metrics because they're used to it and their accountants are used to it. And they don't get what the real power of technology is. So they don't measure the things that they don't quite understand. But change management is the weakest of the other six. Most organizations do quite well on the others. The weaker one of the other of those five is embedded culture. Virtually everybody tells us that the big challenge is going to be culture. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. I seem to remember people keep telling us, quoting various management gurus, but it rings a bell with them. That's the point. Hopefully it only eats strategy for breakfast and not for lunch and dinner. But you can change that. But you will note that change management and culture are very connected. Change management involves changing culture, and that's the starting point for change management. The rest follows from that. Okay, so let's wrap it up. We've got a limited amount of time, and 8 takeaways for you. I'll talk through the first 4, and John can finish off for us. But what we found is technology is worth nothing if you haven't got a purpose to assign it to. You need a business imperative to choose a technology investment. It's a waste of time and money and effort saying we're going to adopt artificial intelligence if there is no business value assigned to doing that, no business purpose, whether short-term or long-term. Secondly, you really do have to listen to the technology. It's moving very fast indeed. What you write off yesterday could be extremely good in a year's time. Number 3, you really do have to be strategic on this. We found many years ago that a lot of even the advisory companies like Gartner were saying, well, robotic process automation, it's a tactical tool. And we were saying in 2015, no, you have to become strategic with this stuff because it has strategic potential. And so do all the other digital transforming technologies. So you have to treat this as a business strategic issue from the start. And therefore, it is about a long-term transformational agenda. Fourthly, I can't say this enough, and John and I have been studying technology, and John has been working in technology, and I've been working in project management before in the 1980s and advising companies subsequently. If the business is not involved in this and making key decisions, then you're not going to get anywhere with these technologies. You need strong IT partnering, but you can't have it driven by the IT people. You just can't. Or you can't abandon it to the IT people, which is very often what actually happens. Sort of management in absentia. Management, but you're really absent. You're not really there. So there's my top 4. The next 4, John?
Yes, Leslie, thank you. I think Leslie's already covered in a way on the previous slide the internal core organizational and technical capabilities, and pointed out quite rightly that change management is probably the weakest one of these, and that's one that we see most organizations having difficulty with. And I think one way of approaching the change management task is to think through, where is value migrating, and where the customer experience can be improved, and where can technology help them respond to unexpected or adverse events. And if you begin with that process, where is the customer, where is value in the customer's eyes at this point, and work backwards from that into what the solution architecture might be, what tools are needed, and what skills, most importantly, in the workforce do we need to emphasize or upskill or and build or acquire, if we don't have them, to design the system for optimal human-machine interaction. So we can acquire, or we can educate, or we can do both. So it's preparing the skills and the labor required to deliver, as well as to understand the impact that these technologies will have on the wider workforce. The ones that seem to me to be the most important out of the 7 is that Leslie went through is, number one, make sure the strategy that you're developing is dynamic, it isn't static, and that it's inclusive. Make sure you have the digital first culture as a mainstay of the organization. Pay attention to the platform, that's the engine room of the architecture. And make sure that the skills and the labor market that are evolving and required are part of the planning process. So it's managing as an organizational behavior change program as much as it is about connecting technologies, because you can connect the technology, and if you haven't managed the human impact of that and the human skill sets required to address it and deal with it, there may be a lot of overlooked opportunities and unnoticed leverage points relative to the competition. So it's keeping your eye on what's happening externally and focusing on what the internal response as an organization needs to be to address the opportunities and thwart any threats. But overall, it's a culture change, it's a behavioral change, as much as it is, if not more, than a technology change, because you're changing the way people behave, the way they do their work, the way they create value for the customer, and the way that they adapt to what is increasingly a dynamic environment. We've seen these we went through the evolution of all these technologies, and they pile up in a way, and they build on each other, and it happens faster and faster because it's digital. So I think we'll stop there, and Pam, I guess open it up for questions.
Great, thank you both. That was great insights. I'm gonna move the slide forward, but yes, if you have questions, please put them in the questions section below, and we will get to those here momentarily. But before that, earlier Bart asked the question, is your organization ready for AI-powered automation? And here is how you can get started. We have 5 spots for a no-charge proof of concept. So please go ahead and email me directly, or in the attachment section, there is a URL link with a form to fill out. Give us your use case, let us know what you're thinking, and we will take those into consideration and select 5. Again, no charge proof of concept, and the first 5 who fill out the form or email me will also receive a copy of the wonderful book that Dr. Leslie Willcocks and Dr. John Hindle wrote. So you don't want to miss that to get more in-depth information with regards to your digital transformation. So again, please submit any questions and we will get to those right away. Give me 1 second. Let me look in the questions tab, see what we've got. All right. So first question, what is the best and easiest way to scale and get automation technology running throughout our enterprise? Who would like to take that?
Well, what we tried to outline in this particular session was the key management insights that get you started early. And when you don't do these things that we were describing, then I think there are at least 5 key things. Then you get massive delays and organizations fail to scale on automation and digital. But it's really about, first of all, getting an executive champion, someone on the board who is responsible, enthusiastic, understands what this technology's potential is, who can protect the project, who can resource the project, who can make appointments, who will establish a governance structure, who will resource the capabilities needed over time, and create the right organization structure that allows automation and digital to be considered business resources, and then that executive champion appointing what we would call a program champion, a credible person whose history of business successes in different parts of the organization, widely respected, very good person manager, gets technology but doesn't necessarily have to be a technical specialist, who will spend 60% of her or his time on this particular project of doing automation and digital transformation. In small organizations, it might be just the one person who's the program champion. In large organizations, we find that a number of people are operating on the same agenda, but fulfilling similar roles in many ways, but reinforcing each other across different parts of the organization.
Great. The next question. I've been trying to implement AI solutions throughout my organization, but I've been met with resistance from various departments for a number of reasons, and I'm afraid we're going to be left behind. What are some recommendations on how to move forward in spite of these challenges? So this, I think, touches a lot on change management, and John or Leslie, either one of you want to take a crack at that?
I think it begins with watching the customer and finding out where value is migrating in the customer's world, and then working backwards from that into what are the solutions and opportunities that are available to address the emerging impact on the customer or opportunity for the customer. But it begins with the customer, is my answer to that question.
Yeah, the problem that we identified in all our research was that organizations are incredibly siloed. They are set up to achieve old ends that are being outflanked by what the technology can do. So when I say organizations are siloed, they are set up to be to work efficiently at solving problems that are probably no longer addressable or can be better addressed using technology and more modern methods. And typically there are 8 silos in an organization. And when we do surveys of organizations and say, well, you're having this resistance because of these silos, here are the 8 silos, where do you score on the how siloed you are? Invariably they say we're very siloed. But then you say, well, now you can see why you've got resistance. So very often the strategies are outdated, the structure, as in this questioner case, the structures are old-fashioned, set up to achieve old objectives. The systems are set up in one way when technology enables them to be run in a completely different way. The skills are outdated. The culture might well be not supportive of digital transformation. Managerial mindsets might be at war here in this question. Resistance from various departments. People become very not in my backyard-ish about new developments within the larger organization. So you have to look at these silos because digital hates silos. It dislikes silos. Then you get silos in the data, in the technology as well. So, it's the IT department have to solve those problems as well. This is why decentralized initiatives are probably not recommendable as a solution. You have to confront that at a centralized level, which is why I said earlier on, you need a chief, a person from the boardroom, an executive champion to overlook all this, so that you won't get serious movement until you start doing the things that I said in the previous answer.
Great. Just a reminder, go ahead and add questions. We're coming towards the end here, so please put your questions in the question section. One other question that you did touch on in the first response, who is the best person in my organization to fill the role of program champion?
Do you want to take that, John, or shall I take that one as well?
Well, I suppose one would first look to the IT department, but that's probably not where you want to look. And I don't mean that negatively around IT, but they've got to manage continuity. And what you're looking for is someone at a level who understands both the customer environment and the technology environment. So that person has to have technological savvy, and also has to have good access and an understanding of the customer engagement and the customer's worlds, and what they're facing, and then work backward into the organization. It probably won't necessarily come from the IT function. It will probably come from a more strategic business planning function at an executive level. And I think then it's the recruitment of the team and putting together the program to effect the digital transformation has to include all the parts of the organization, not least of which is human resources. So the team needs to be diverse, and the team needs to touch the major constitutional elements of the organization. But the leadership of it has to be someone at a senior level, probably having worked in organizational strategy at some point, who has also a good understanding of the customer world and the technology that options that are emerging or already available.
Yeah, when we say a senior executive, that's code really for a word that we don't use, which is political clout. You need a person with political clout and political nous. Those are also requirements for that particular job, especially if you're experiencing a lot of resistance for the reasons that we stated earlier.
Someone who has good executive access to the leadership at the top of the organization, and to the cabinet, if you will, that manages the business on a day-to-day basis.
And very often that's not a person from the IT function, historically speaking.
Absolutely.
Great.
Nothing against IT, but IT tends to be focused more on keeping the lights on and running the day-to-day operation of the business. And what you need is someone who sits outside of that, but with knowledge of what goes on in that organization.
Wonderful. I don't see any other questions at the moment, but please, for the audience, remember to reach out for the free proof of concept. I will end the slides here and thank everyone for joining us, not only for today's session, but for the other 2 prior sessions in this 3-part series. And if this is the first one that you've watched, please go back and watch the other 2. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you.